This is the screen where it happens. The moments that can change the world.
These are the faces we see, the voices we empower.
This is the work that continues, who we are today and what we can become.
This is journalism that reflects the world we live in.
I'm Salma Abdulaziz in Kyiv, and this is CNN.
Will it be necessary to change some laws to help us as we go along? It may very well be.
The engines were on, the cabin crew on board, but at the last minute, a court halted the UK's first deportation flight to Rwanda. So what happens next? Plus,
even though Russia has fewer and fewer missiles with each passing day, Ukraine's need for such systems remains.
will NATO answer Ukraine's call for more weapons at a crucial time in its war against Russia? And the Fed is planning some bold action today, but will it keep soaring inflation from worsening? It's 10 a.m. in New York. I'm Julia Chatterley. Hello and welcome to Connect the World. Digging in and pressing on. The UK government is vowing to move ahead with its controversial deportation plan to Rwanda after Tuesday's flight for asylum seekers was grounded. The plane was on the tarmac when the European Court of Human Rights intervened. The court ordered the UK not to deport one asylum seeker for the time being as legal proceedings play out. That ruling led to the remaining asylum seekers being removed from the flight. British Home Secretary Priti Patel addressed the UK Parliament a short time ago. Take a listen.
While this decision by the Strasbourg court to intervene was disappointing and surprising given the repeated and considered judgments to the contrary in our domestic courts, we remain committed to this policy.
CNN's Nada Bashir is in France, where she's been reporting on the refugee situation in Calais. She's in our Paris bureau now and joins us live. Let's talk about this, because the reaction there from the Home Secretary and the British Prime Minister was, I think, unrepentant is the word, and they're going to press on with more flights. What happens next?
Absolutely, Julia. You heard there, disappointing and surprising, but in fact we've long heard from both the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister, and even most recently from the Foreign Secretary, that the government had been expecting legal challenges, perhaps not from the European Court of Human Rights. And just in the last few hours or so, we did hear that statement from Priti Patel updating us on the situation around that flight that was set to take off last night. We now understand that 3 individuals were removed after the European Court of Human Rights intervened. But I have to say, we were seeing, or expecting rather, more than 100 people to be on that flight. That figure has dwindled down significantly since that first High Court legal battle on Friday, down to single figures. Yesterday, it was said that 7 people would be on board that flight. Of course, it was later granted. So it isn't just the European Court of Human Rights. We have seen domestic legal challenges as well. But as you said there, the government has said they will be pushing ahead. Take a listen.
We believe that we are fully compliant with our domestic and international obligations, and preparations for our future flights and the next flights have already begun. This government will not be deterred from doing the right thing. We will not be put off by the inevitable legal last-minute challenges, nor we will allow mobs, Madam Deputy Speaker, to block removals.
So, Julia, already preparing for those next flights. We heard previously from the Foreign Secretary that those that weren't on board the first flight would be expected to be on that next flight. Priti Patel says that those that were removed have been tagged until those legal proceedings are seen through and that we have that final judgment. But of course, she also highlighted that this European Human Rights Court judgment wasn't on the policy itself. It wasn't saying that this policy is unlawful, but rather that these deportations had to be postponed until there could be a more thorough legal assessment. But she also used the word mobs there, and it is important to note that the actual criticisms that we have been seeing, which are widespread, are coming from the likes of the UN's Human Refugee Agency, from UNHCR, from Human Rights Watch, even from the Church of England. So it is pretty widespread there. Julia?
Nada, great to have you with us. Thank you so much for the context there, Nada Bashir in Paris. Now joining us for more context, Geoffrey Robertson, QC, was part of the legal team that helped to win that last-minute decision at the European Court of Human Rights, and he joins us now live. Geoffrey, great to have you with us. I think it's important for us to understand the role of the European Court of Human Rights and why it was established in order for us to understand to what extent the UK is bound by this decision.
Well,
Explain.
It was after the war, with the hope that never again would Nazis and their ideology get involved. The British lawyers in particular drafted the European Convention of Human Rights at Winston Churchill's direction and now some 40 countries of Europe are participants. The court sits at Strasbourg and it decides whether actions by governments are compliant. And the British government has a pretty good record. There was a guy 150 years ago, a man called William Gladstone, perhaps our greatest prime minister, who said Britain will always obey international tribunals, no matter how bad the judgment is, because obedience to international law is far more important than the alternative of war and dispute. So that's the basis upon which, if you don't get what you need, and these people are entitled to have the decision made as to whether they are true asylum seekers seeking to avoid death and torture in the countries they've come from, or whether they're simply economic immigrants wanting a better life in Britain. That's a decision that has to be made, according to the Refugee Convention, by British judges. But this government has decided that they should all be put to Rwanda, in the middle of Africa, where Rwandan judges will decide. So
Geoffrey,
the question of whether that's lawful has to be decided, and the European Court has said these people should not be deported until it is.
I mean, as we said, you represented the lead case on this. So as we heard from Priti Patel today, they're going to press on with more flights. How strong is your argument to continue to do this and just to prevent each flight that goes? It points to I think, the message that Boris Johnson was sending earlier, which is the way that we get around this, the government gets around this, is if they want to continue to do this and follow through on this controversial policy, you have to change the laws to do it. And then this court has no jurisdiction.
Well, Priti Patel is pretty angry, but that's something that she should have expected.
Right.
It is unfair and inhumane to put these people, some of them with a genuine claim to avoid torture and death, to send them to Rwanda, where the justice system is highly suspect. And this is one of the issues that will be litigated in a few weeks' time. I don't know, Julia, whether you can remember the film Hotel Rwanda.
Yes.
It was the hero of that, who saved thousands of lives, has now been sentenced this year to life imprisonment in Rwanda at a trial that did raise questions about the independence of the judges who didn't allow him to cross-examine the main witness against him. But that will be one of the issues that will be decided. And obviously, these people would prefer to have their fate determined by an English or indeed a French judge, rather than by the question mark Rwandan judiciary.
Right. And obviously the Rwandan government aren't here to represent themselves and to push back on your comments. My final question, and it's a tough one because
they
you have
said that. Yeah.
Well, it's a tough one because you have a minute to answer it, sir. But I know you can do it. And it ties to your prowess, I think, in fighting this policy. Do you think they will ever successfully, having paid all this money to Rwanda to take these people, ever successfully send these people to Rwanda without changing the law?
Well, they can change the law. If they're true Democrats, they would have put the law to Parliament, and they didn't have the guts to do it. They didn't dare put Parliament to decide. And we've already seen the church, the king in waiting, have all described it as an appalling policy.
Allegedly.
So they might not get it through Parliament, and they will try to use their executive power. But there is the question, they can't send these people off to Africa illegally, and British law will stop them if they try to do it without going through all the human rights hoops that they have to do with people who are in dire need, who are terribly traumatized by being taken out to airports and then taken back. It is quite inhumane. So hopefully the government will see sense and will postpone all question of flights until the legality of the policy that they didn't dare put to Parliament will be decided.
Sir, fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much, and you will be there to defend them. International human rights lawyer Jeffrey Robertson, QC. Sir, thank you. OK, people around the globe are paying more to eat, drive and keep their lights on. In the United States, the central bank is poised to take drastic action later today to try and tame inflation, with possibly the biggest interest rate hike in nearly 30 years. US markets have been bracing for the news. In the meantime, the European Central Bank held an emergency meeting a short time ago too. It's promised more, quote, flexibility in addressing disparities in bond yields across nations. Let me give you a quick look at what you're seeing there in terms of the market. Strong gains today, as you can see, the Nasdaq, the tech-heavy sector outperforming. CNN's Claire Sebastian has been following the ECB's meeting, and business correspondent Rahel Solomon is in New York and following the Fed frizz too. Rahel, it's a given, I think, at this stage, she says, carefully but confidently, that they're going to go 0.75 of a percentage point. The big question is, what do they say about what it's going to take ultimately to bring inflation down? How high do interest rates have to go?
Well, we certainly will be listening very closely at 2:30 Eastern when we hear from Jay Powell. But Julia, as you alluded to, 30 years practically. 1994 was the last time we saw the U.S. Federal Reserve raise rates by 0.75% in one meeting. They tend to move in a more gradual, traditional fashion of 0.25%. But of course, with inflation being as high as it is, take a look at consumer inflation in the U.S. The Fed appearing to believe that a break from tradition is necessary. I want to show you CPI for the last few years so you can see the last reading we got for consumer inflation hitting about 8.6%. Unacceptably high is what we're hearing from the administration. So when the Fed raises rates today, again, the assumption being about 75 basis points or 0.75%, it will do two things, right? It will raise rates for consumers here in the U.S. for everything from student loans, car loans, mortgage rates for sure. And the idea being that it hopefully curbs demand and cools inflation. But it will also importantly signal to market watchers that the Fed, if in fact they do raise rates by 0.75%, is on top of it, and they will do what it takes to rein in inflation. And so, Julia, to your question, well, what will it take? How high will they go? Deutsche Bank putting out a note yesterday saying that it too sees 0.75% for today's meeting, but also for July's meeting, seeing the Fed funds rate go to about 2.3% in the near future and about 4.1%. So that makes borrowing more expensive, which, Julia, is exactly the point. The Fed is trying to curb spending and curb demand and try to bring a bit more balance into the economy in terms of the supply of goods and the demand for those goods and services.
Right, and they may still have to hike beyond then too. It's interesting, the phrase is actions speak louder than words, but where financial markets are concerned and central bankers are concerned, those words sometimes have more weight than the actions. And Claire, that's certainly, I think, the case that we're seeing for the European Central Bank promising to raise rates, the bond market reacting immediately. And of course, that has dramatic tightening effects too.
Yeah, so the backdrop to this, Julia, was that, of course, last week we heard from the European Central Bank, which said that for the first time in 11 years in July, they would be raising rates. That was extremely significant. That led to a big rise in bond yields, particularly in more indebted countries like Italy. And so the European Central Bank today announced this ad hoc meeting and sort of had to flesh out what they said last week. The markets appeared to sort of suggest that they didn't have enough detail about what the ECB would do, in particular about the issue of what's called fragmentation, when borrowing costs in some countries in the European Union go much higher than others, and then you have this imbalance which can lead to instability in the region. This is something that the ECB wants to guard against, and that is exactly what they announced today. On one hand, something new. There'll be a new anti-fragmentation instrument. They're going to accelerate the design of that, and they also reiterated what they had said about something old, which is the pandemic-era purchase program, a bond buy program during the pandemic. They are now looking to reinvest funds from that as bonds mature, and they say they're going to do that flexibly, which of course means they can target it to more distressed areas of the Eurozone. So they have done this in a way to try to calm markets. The jury's still out on whether it's worked. It looks like the euro has given up some of its gains but stabilized a little bit. Italian bond yields went up and down again, but they seem to have stabilized a bit. So perhaps the markets are giving the ECB the benefit of the doubt.
Yes, when it's tightening, not tightening, when you're easing at the same time to ease the tightening. Rachel Solomon in New York, Claire Sebastian in London. No one said it was easy. Thank you, ladies, for your reports. You're watching Connect the World. Still ahead, the struggle for Severodonetsk. What Ukraine's top officials are saying about the fresh challenges facing Ukrainian troops. And NATO tells Ukraine help is on the way, but will the alliance give Kyiv what it really wants? All the details just ahead.
You've seen this explosion of life, and life has come back because of a new habitat that's been created with a whole load of big animals. So we went from this very intensive conventional farming system to a free-roaming, animal-based habitat creation project, rewilding.
One of the things you can do is introduce free-roaming herbivores, and all of them, the way they disturb the land, the way they trample and rootle, everything that they do has a hugely important knock-on effect, a sort of domino effect for biodiversity. We've seen here some of the rarest species in Britain. An amazing species that we had never had here before is the turtle dove. We're probably the only piece of land in the UK where turtle dove numbers are actually rising.
This butterfly is an incredibly rare butterfly. Here you can see it in their hundreds.
It's about kicking off natural processes again in a system, and then as human beings trying to stand back from it as much as possible and let nature perform.
To see a landscape in your own country and what you've been missing suddenly come to life has been this extraordinary revelation, this surprise, this feeling of just joy that we can do it.
Welcome back. The war in Ukraine has reached a pivotal moment. That assessment coming from US and other Western intelligence officials who believe it's essential for Ukraine to stop Russian forces from moving further into the Donbass. Ukrainian forces are struggling to keep partial control of the key city of Severodonetsk. Ukraine's military chief in the Luhansk region of the Donbass says Russia is attacking from 3 directions and destroying residential buildings. Ukraine's president is again pleading for more advanced anti-missile weapon systems. CNN's Sama Abdelaziz is tracking developments for us in the Ukrainian capital city of Kyiv. I mean, it's distressing to hear this. We know that weapons are being provided. The challenge is training those troops in order to be able to use them and really trying to understand where they are in the country. It's tough, isn't it, to even get a picture of what's happening.
Let's start with that comment, a pivotal moment, that this is a turning point in the conflict, because I want to explain what that means, what the concern is here for Ukraine's allies. The concern is that Ukraine is on the back foot, that Russia appears to be inch by inch gaining that territory in the east of the country, and Western intelligence says there's a worst case scenario here, and that is that Russia takes that territory, takes that east, is able to solidify those gains from the Donbass all the way down to Mariupol through to Crimea, and eventually use that as a staging ground to push even further into Ukraine, that President Putin's appetite doesn't end here. And what that means is that we're looking at a very long war, one that will drag out and need not just a band-aid package here, Julia. President Zelensky painting that very bleak picture of a force that is outmanned, that is outgunned, that is much weaker than this Russian military. Take a look.
Even though Russia has fewer and fewer missiles with each passing day, Ukraine's need for such systems remains, because Russia still has enough Soviet types of missiles, which are even more dangerous. They are many times less precise, and therefore threaten civilian objects and ordinary residential buildings much more.
Now, Ukrainian officials say they've only received 10% of what they've requested in terms of military assistance from their allies. Now, some of the things that they want that is on their wish list, America is simply not willing to give, because they fear that longer range missiles could further provoke the conflict, could further aggravate an already very aggressive Russia. And you do have a sense of war fatigue setting in. Ukrainian officials say that they feel that resolute determination to stand by Ukraine at the beginning of the conflict, that is beginning to soften, especially as you look at gas prices rising, the fear of inflation. Will Western allies continue to bolster this very weak Ukrainian military, which, you know, they're taking major losses, over 100 soldiers a day, Ukrainian officials tell us. So can they continue to bolster them in the long term, Julia?
It's such an important point. The pivotal moment is also about morale, I think, at this moment too. Salma, just very quickly, are you getting that sense from the people that you're speaking to there? It's a very important moment for morale as much as anything else.
Absolutely. And I think that's why you hear President Zelensky continuing to address his countrymen and address the international community every single day, provide updates on the battleground every single day. But it's hard to ignore the fact, Julia, that so many people are coming back in body bags, not just soldiers, but residents, but civilians. We were at a morgue earlier today where there were the bodies of dead people coming back from Mariupol, again, a place where thousands of people are believed to have been killed. It's the weight of this war, the suffering and the extent of it, and the reality that it could just drag on that much longer, Julia.
Yeah. Salma Abdelaziz, thank you for that report there from Kyiv. Now, NATO is answering a call by Ukraine for more weapons at a crucial time in its war against Russia. At this hour, NATO defence ministers are meeting in Brussels to look at ways to provide more military support. This includes a plan to modernise Ukraine's military capabilities. NATO Secretary-General says the alliance is committed to Ukraine. CNN Pentagon correspondent.
We are extremely focused on stepping up, providing more support, more advanced weapons, and also to do that in the best possible way for the Ukrainians, because we support them in their just fight against the brutal Russian invasion.
CNN Pentagon correspondent Oren Lieberman is monitoring this meeting and joins us live from Brussels. Great to have you with us. There was a tweet put out earlier by the advisor to the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, and he said the ratio of Russian to Ukrainian artillery in some areas is 10-1. So it's a sheer amount of weaponry that's a mismatch here, but it's also the training required, even when you provide that weaponry, to ensure that those troops can use it. There's so many things they have to address here. How do they go about it, Oren?
Well, that process has begun. The West and the U.S. were well aware that a lot of the equipment that Ukrainian armed forces are using is Soviet-era equipment. It's older artillery, older fighter aircraft as well, and much older equipment that was going to begin running out at some point. And to prepare for that, that's one of the reasons the U.S. sent in their own howitzers, and the West has sent in Western equipment, more modern weaponry. The difference may sound small. Older Soviet equipment uses 152mm artillery ammo, for example, versus 155mm ammo. But the systems and the differences are significant, so it requires training And then it requires Ukraine to get that equipment to the front line. The transition has been happening. As Ukraine runs out of that older ammo, they've transitioned to the newer equipment. But it's incredibly difficult, obviously, to do that in the middle of a fight. But Ukraine has no other option. That's one of the other elements that makes this such a critical moment. And according to the sources we've spoken with and the contexts, there's another very significant reason here, and that's that the outcome of the fight now in eastern Ukraine that we're seeing, in Severodonetsk, for example, has the potential. It's possible that this begins to shape the final outcome of this war, even as it continues to drag on. And that's another one of the reasons here. Everyone is well aware of the significance of the moment. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, when he spoke just a short time ago to kick off this Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting, he specifically said and pointed out all that the U.S. has provided to this point. Howitzers, earlier this month, they provided multiple launch rocket systems called HIMARS, and he strongly suggested the U.S. is about to do more, saying the U.S. will continue to do its part, and that's part of the reason for this. The last time this contact group met in person in late April, we saw announcements from, for example, the Canadians and the UK about weapons they were sending in. Now there's nearly 50 countries here, so we look to see what countries and if the U.S. will make announcements. A senior U.S. defense official has said they expect more announcements from countries, and it comes at a critical time for Ukraine. Julia, the question, will it be enough? I'll give you an example. Ukraine has called for 1,000 howitzers, 1,000 pieces of artillery. To this date, the U.S. has sent in about 10% of that, so they're calling for much, much more, and they're calling for it quickly.
Yeah, I reiterate that tweet. Russian to Ukrainian artillery in some areas, a ratio of 10 to 1. Doesn't get more powerful than that. CNN Pentagon correspondent Oren Lieberman reporting it from Brussels there, so thank you. Okay, let's get you up to speed on some of the other stories that are on our radar right now. Iran has confirmed it's preparing to test launch 2 satellite-carrying rockets. With tensions high over Tehran's nuclear program, some experts see the test launches as provocative, since the technology is similar to what is needed for intercontinental ballistic missiles. And the Kremlin says it's not tracking the whereabouts of jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny after an abrupt prison transfer. Navalny's aides raised concerns for his safety Tuesday when he was moved to a maximum security facility, but they were not told which one. Sri Lanka, reeling from food and fuel shortages, is giving public workers Fridays off this summer so they can grow their own crops. The country's economic crisis is so dire it prompted mass protests and a change of government. And the search for 2 men missing in the Amazon continues, but false information is making the tough situation even more difficult. The details ahead. And El Salvador bet big on Bitcoin until Bitcoin bit back. We'll look at how the crypto meltdown is affecting the country. Stay with us.
End of 2021, we had almost 7.28 million tourists that came into Dubai. Not big numbers compared to before, but very big considering the circumstances globally. Then you look at the first quarter of this year, where Expo, of course, was tail-ending the second half of Expo. We had close to 4 million visitors that came in Q1. That's amazing.
You're not back at pre-COVID levels then?
Not yet,
Not
but
yet.
The spirit is there. For us as Dubai, the appetite was always to go back to pre-COVID as much as we could. So it's great the fact that the private and public sector relationship is so strong that whatever we do it together. I always talk about Dubai being almost like a board, where even the private sector have a say, and they're heard, and then things are implemented. So it's not just one person decides everything else. That's the difference about Dubai.
Mainland China tolerates no signs of dissent whatsoever.
Are you anticipating dozens of people being prosecuted? Hundreds? Thousands?
Stories of mass internment camps have been trickling out.
Do you think you'll see your husband again?
This period of mourning is taking place in a real climate of fear. The humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in front of our eyes here.
This is one of the cells. Come on in here.
We're
flying over ISIS front lines. This is the only protection we have. The nerves are still very much on edge. Firefighters have been battling this blaze for weeks. What do you say to people who question climate change?
We need to do something now.
Ivan Watson, CNN.
I'm David Culver in Beijing, and this is CNN.
Welcome back. I'm Julia Chatterley in New York, and you're watching Connect the World. Brazil's ambassador to the UK has apologised for conflicting messages about a missing journalist. Dom Phillips and Indigenous expert Bruno Pereira have been missing since June 5th. The handling of the case has sparked global protests. A diplomatic official wrongly told Phillips's family 2 bodies had been found during search operations in the Amazon. The ambassador says the search continues. Meanwhile, police say they have arrested a second person in connection with the disappearance of the 2 men. Matt Rivers is following the story from Mexico City and joins us live now. I mean, appalling for the families that are being given wrong information. Do we know whether these 2 individuals have been found, whether they're still missing, or whether they're dead or alive?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of open questions at this point, Julie. I'll give an update on the search in just a second here, but you can imagine, or really you can't imagine, what this family, the family of both of these 2 missing men, would be going through after hearing word on Monday that the bodies of their 2 loved ones had been found. According to the family of Dom Phillips, they said that they were contacted by the Brazilian embassy in London with the deputy chief of mission, according to the family, calling them on Monday saying that they had received word from officials in Brazil that the bodies had been found. It was later on in the day on Monday that Brazilian federal police said that was not true, including indigenous search groups that are helping in this search also saying that's not true, and that forced the Brazilian Foreign Ministry and the ambassador himself in the UK to apologize to the family, saying that the search goes on. Here's what we know so far, is that there have been signs of what the Brazilian president has called malice happening to these 2 men. Their personal belongings, some of them have been found in a far western part of the Amazonas state in Brazil where they were working on a book project when they disappeared. We know that blood has been found in the boat of one of the suspects that have been arrested in this case. We also know that human remains have been found in a river near where the pair went missing. However, those remains are still being analyzed, DNA testing ongoing in the Brazilian capital of Brasilia. So, Julia, signs don't look great for their well-being at this point, but the idea that there was some sort of confirmation that their bodies had been found, that was just false.
To your point, to your earlier point, just appalling for the families. There has been a second arrest, I believe, in connection with this. What can you tell us about that individual?
Yeah, we don't have a ton of information from Brazilian federal police. They put out a press statement not long ago saying that a 41-year-old man has been arrested. He's currently being interrogated as a part of this search. This is only the second suspect to be arrested at this point, with Brazilian federal police saying that this 41-year-old was found with several ammo cartridges as well as a paddle that they say is being analyzed as a part of the criminal investigation. No more information than that, but clearly Brazilian federal police, moving towards making more arrests in this case as that information becomes available to them.
Matt, thank you for that. We'll continue to follow this story. Matt Rivers reporting from Mexico City there. To El Salvador now, hoping braced in Bitcoin would bring some much-needed money into the country. It has done the opposite. In September, El Salvador invested $103 million in Bitcoin. On Monday, they were worth around $50 million. The crypto market in general flourished during the pandemic, but has tumbled in recent months. At last check, Bitcoin was trading, as you can see there, just above $21,000 per Bitcoin, its lowest level, in fact, since December of 2020. Patrick Ottman joins us from Havana with the story. Patrick, there are many things that I can say about this. I talked to the IMF chief about this, and she said just because you can doesn't mean you should. But the president continues to suggest he should be buying more Bitcoin. How important is this for a country that adopted this as legal tender? It could be used for general transactions. This kind of volatility doesn't help.
No, not at all. And you have to remember that just about a year ago, when this announcement was first made, it was about so much more than just financial transactions. El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele promising that his country's financial future, that this was going to be the road to a brighter financial future for El Salvador, and they've hit a lot of potholes on the way. First when they rolled out their own digital wallet, there was a lot of technical issues. Many Salvadorans, just as you were saying, complained about a currency that changed so widely in value from one day to another. Many people complained there weren't enough ATMs, those kinds of problems. And now to have such a tremendous drop in value, it is not going the way certainly that Salvadoran government officials had hoped. They really expected that more Salvadorans would be using these financial tools, their digital wallets that every Salvadoran was given when they began this plan, that Bitcoin entrepreneurs would be flocking to El Salvador, that they would even build this futuristic Bitcoin city, but Nayib Bukele not backing down as he is known to do. He is an unrepentant, unapologetic believer in the future of Bitcoin. He's been saying over the last several months that he is buying the dip, that he's continuing to invest in Bitcoin. But right now, Julia, these look like very bad bets. They've lost, as you said, half their value. And then you have to think about the millions of dollars El Salvador has spent getting ready to use Bitcoin widely, and then just the loss of face. The fact that they have embraced Bitcoin like no other nation, just as Bitcoin has crashed and burned.
It's such an important point, and there's two things here. There's the utility value and using this as an alternative currency, and then there's the store of value argument, to your point, that this was perhaps some investment strategy that the country was running. The finance minister spoke about this and sort of brushed it off and said, look, it's not that big a deal in terms of the finances of the country. But you could argue, Patrick, at this point, the perception, the international perception perhaps of the responsibility of this government is called into question. And that's the danger.
It's not a good look when your president is essentially using the national coffers, public funds, like a day trader would. That doesn't inspire confidence, and it is a big deal because it's affected their credit rating. It's raised doubts about whether or not they will be able to repay back debt, and again to see the president just continuing to double down despite all evidence saying that he continues to believe in the future of Bitcoin, continues to tie his country's future to digital currencies, when you're seeing more and more people in El Salvador saying this just has not played out the way that we were promised it would. And certainly when the initial announcement happened, Nayib Bukele wanted to generate headlines. It was a very bold move. He's now generating headlines for all the wrong reasons.
Yes. If you want headlines, you got them, but you'd prefer good headlines rather than the opposite. Patrick, great to have you with us. Thank you so much for that. Patrick Ottman there in Havana. Now, nearly 100 million people in the United States are under extreme heat alerts as a massive heat wave moves across the southern and central U.S. In Texas, officials are urging people to stay indoors to prevent deadly heat stroke. In the meantime, schools in the Midwest are closing early or switching to virtual learning to help keep young students safe. Adding to the sweltering misery, storms in Ohio knocked out power to hundreds of thousands of homes as the demand for air conditioning surges. And across the Atlantic, an intense heat wave is also hitting parts of Europe. Spain is now seeing its earliest heat wave in 4 decades. Record temperatures are expected to hit neighbouring France today too. That's a major concern in southern France, where wildfires are raging. And now the UK has alerted a health alert as temperatures are expected to soar. Let's go to CNN meteorologist Chad Myers in Atlanta for a check on the weather. Chad, any sense of relief in the near future, or it's all bad news?
Not really. I mean, you're going to get some relief in Germany. We're not going to get a lot of relief in France or Spain, yes, for a while. But I think you said it best when you said an early season heat wave. Yes, we have heat. Yes, we have power outages in parts of the Great Lakes in Ohio. A couple 100,000 people don't even have fans today. 50 or so cities in the United States will break their record high. Now, this isn't probably as hot as we're going to get in July and August, but this is very warm for June, certainly across all of the eastern part of the United States, all of the western part of the United States, because now the heat dome that we've been seeing here in the eastern half of the U.S. is moving to the west. And now look at temperatures here in the upper 40s in some spots. And the temperatures you see here, 44, that's sitting in the shade. If you happen to be near the concrete or asphalt or in the sun, you are going to feel warmer than that. So this is the area that is going to get most of the heat. Western Europe, all the way from a little bit cooler in Portugal because of an ocean breeze, but still you're going to be in the 40s for the next few days. And that's going to be the same story, I would say, at least until Thursday of next week. Yes, there's some cooler air to the east, and it does kind of filter on down, but it's just one day after another with the high sun angle. You know, this is going to be the highest sun angle we have for a very long time. It is summer solstice. So that's what happens when summer solstice come around. You get temperatures in the 40s and the humidity will be high. It's going to feel more like 44, 45, and 46, even though the thermometer isn't going to say that. Julia.
Good grief, Chad. People have to keep hydrated.
I know.
I think that's the message. Keep hydrated. Thank you for that. And the weather update there from Atlanta. Okay, still to come. This is what victory sounds like, but what did Costa Rica actually win? Details in our sports update next.
Heard it all before? But have you heard it like this?
The ultimate disruptor looks set to shake up our world. We really can't ignore the impact that this has. What can we do that explores a fresh angle? So let's untangle the players and political forces. The truth is a lot more complex. What's really going on?
Fast-paced news, in-depth reports, and fact checks from the perspective of The Global Brief with Bianca Nobilo. Tonight on CNN.
3 Strands Global Foundation is a nonprofit that has been combating human trafficking for the last 12 years, focused in on 3 areas: prevention education, prevention through employment, and prevention through engagement. So we have a few initiatives that directly look at the root causes. One is prevention education, so that teachers can identify exploitation and trafficking, as well as be trauma-informed, and students in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade can be educated. When the pandemic hit, our prevention education program, Protect, we had to do a pivot. The kids no longer were in classrooms. Teachers were no longer in classrooms teaching. They had to make adjustments to be able to actually reach the kids online, which meant that they were looking in a different way with different eyes at their students as their students were learning this curriculum. We had to make sure that teachers still could identify any exploitation or abuse that was happening. Our second program is called the Employ Plus Empower program, and this is our prevention through employment. We want to make sure that survivors aren't re-exploited and that they have a sustainable job, that they are financially secure, and that they can thrive. Survivor voices are incredibly important in this movement, and I believe strongly that when we listen to survivors, we actually will create prevention programs and initiatives that do exactly what we need to do to prevent this crime.
Welcome back to party time in Costa Rica, because football fans got their heart's desire. Woohoo! Their side gets to go to the World Cup in November. As you can see, the fans already feel like champions. The big question is, what are their chances? World Sport anchor Amanda Davies joins us now. How are they going to do, Amanda? What's your prediction?
I mean, we're still some time away, Julia, but they've got to hope they're going better than they did last time out. They were knocked out in the group stages. They were surprise quarter-finalists 8 years ago in Brazil, but they are in a really tough group with the 2010 champions Spain, also Germany and Japan. Oof. So some real powerhouses. But they are the 32nd and final team to secure their place at the World Cup finals. This may be the tournament with the longest World Cup final build-up, but the team's being secured late on. They beat New Zealand in the Intercontinental Playoff last night, and so we are set very much now into the final countdown. You've got to say there's some surprising results in kind of build-up games last night. We've got news of those coming up in World Sport in just a couple of minutes.
Can't wait. And with fans like that, to be fair to Costa Rica, what more does a team need? Willing them on. Thank you, Amanda. World Sport is after this break. Stay with CNN.
We've missed the globe-trotting and adventures, and we're longing to get out and go.
This is living.
Uncovering the city's DNA.
Look at that.
Meeting people who will share its secrets.
It's going to be very cold.
And making discoveries that wow.
We're not doing that again.
It's a world of wonder.
Gorgeous.
Now, go and see it. Saturday on CNN, in association with Turkish Airlines.
Hi, thanks for joining us. Welcome along to World Sport Live from London with me, Amanda Davis. There are more questions than answers, it seems, at the moment with golf, as the recalibration and impact of the launch of the Saudi-backed Live Golf League continues to be felt. Whilst this week sees the build-up to the US Masters, it's being held at Brookline, the scene of a memorable United States Ryder Cup victory against Europe in 1999. And with the ban that the PGA Tour have issued to all players who've joined the new league, it has raised concerns about what the future holds for one of the greatest sporting events on the planet. Here's Don Riddell with more.
Here's the thing, Amanda. We don't really know what's going to happen to anything in the world of golf right now, the world of professional golf, and the Ryder Cup has emerged as a concern of some. You're right, Brookline is the scene, or was the scene, of one of the most famous or perhaps infamous Ryder Cups back in 1999, when the American team, which Phil Mickelson was playing on, came from 4 points behind to win the Sunday singles. It was an absolutely extraordinary day in the world of sport, and people are now wondering, where does Mickelson stand with the Ryder Cup? He's played on it 12 times. He almost certainly would have captained the American team one day. Is he going to be able to? We'll see. Jon Rahm is one of the top European players at the moment, and when he spoke to the media yesterday, the Ryder Cup definitely emerged as one of the things he's most concerned about now going forward.
I hope the Ryder Cup doesn't suffer. I think the Ryder Cup is the biggest attraction the game of golf has to bring new people in. So I hope we don't lose the essence and the aspect that the Ryder Cup is. That's one of my biggest concerns, to be honest. You know, it's an event we all play for free, and it's one of our favorite weeks, win or lose. And I think that says a lot about the game.
Jon Rahm's Spanish compatriot, Sergio Garcia, former Masters champion, is a Ryder Cup legend. He's gone to Live Golf. Is he going to be able to play in the Ryder Cup again? What about, for example, Lee Westwood and Ian Poulter, two men who have really built their careers around their extraordinary success in the Ryder Cup? They've gone to the Saudi-backed series. They would have been guaranteed future captains of the European team in the future. Is that going to happen anymore? Nobody knows. And for those that love the Ryder Cup, that really is something that they're pretty sad about.
That was Don Riddell a little bit earlier on. Plenty more from him and the team from Brookline over the next few days. The action hasn't even got started yet. Now, if reports are to be believed, this year's Stanley Cup final could be one of the best head-to-head showdowns the NHL has produced in years. Two heavyweights, the two-time defending champions, Tampa Bay Lightning, up against a talent-packed and hungry Colorado Avalanche. But don't take my word for it. Two men far better placed to give you the lowdown. CNN Sports' Coy Wire and NHL commentator of 15 years, Dan Kamal.
Come one, come all. It's Dan Kamal. You want to know how big of a deal this guy is? I posted an Instagram video with him just a bit ago, and Tampa Bay Lightning longtime veteran Zach Bogosian texts me and says, "Was that Dan Kamal?" Tell him I said hello. He's a longtime broadcaster, well respected and well positioned to break this down for us. Let's talk about the Lightning. They could become, Dan, the first NHL team to three-peat in 40 years. How are they able to do this in this era of the salary cap?
Yeah, Coy, they would join only 3 other teams that have ever won 3 in a row. They do it by adapting, and they do it with great management, great scouting, great coaching. I mean, it's amazing how adaptable they are. You want to play a defensive style, as they had to in the 2020 Cup win, or you want to play more explosively, as they have had to do against Florida, against the Rangers, against Toronto. They can adapt.
Now, Lightning defenseman Ryan McDonough said that we hate to lose as much as we like to win, and I can't envision any other team hoisting that cup. Dan, the Colorado Avalanche, though, they are the favorites. Home ice advantage in front of fans who haven't seen them play in the final since they won it back in 2001. What are some of the key matchups to watch in this final?
I think the Avalanche will present the biggest test so far for Tampa. I say explosively on offense, Nathan MacKinnon and Nikita Kucherov. Both can light it up for the Avalanche and the Lightning, respectively. 2 of the maybe 3 or 4 or 5 best defensemen in the world are going to be showcased. We have Cale Makar for the Avalanche. We have Victor Hedman for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And you have the greatest goaltender, maybe one of the top 2 or 3 in the world, Vasilevsky for Tampa. So there are big stars coming out for this ultimate NHL showcase.
Yeah, it could come down to those goalies too. You mentioned Andrei Vasilevsky. He's been there with the Lightning the last 2 cups that they've won, while the Avalanche, on the other hand, they're going to have an injured group coming back. Darcy Kemper, they say he's 100%, but also backup Pavel Francouz has been in there battling it out. Now, Dan, LeBron James, in awe of Lord Stanley's Cup this week. The Stanley Cup's the oldest trophy competed for by pro athletes in North America, donated by Lord Stanley of Preston in 1892. What are some of the traditions that make the cup so special?
You know, one of the things I remember is Andrew Ladd sitting on a mountaintop with the cup. I mean, it's a gorgeous trophy. It's just a beautiful trophy, first and foremost. And the stories behind the trophy. Every member of a winning team gets to spend a day with the cup. You've had babies bathed in there. You've had cocktails drunk from the cup. You've had the cup dropped into swimming pools. You've had misspellings on the cup, like the 80-81 Islanders, whose team name was misspelled. It's just got great tradition.
Chris Draper back in '98 with Detroit has put his baby daughter in it. She turned it into a toilet. She had an accident. Hey, 2 forces of nature, Avalanche and Lightning, battling it out in a sport where having no teeth is like a badge of honor, Amanda. Stanley Cup final, Game 1, just hours away.
That was Coy and Dan. Now it has had the longest build-up for any World Cup, with 159 days to go. Teams are only just set. Costa Rica booked their place as the 32nd and final team in Qatar.
This is the tiger track, so I'm doing the measurement to make sure this is real tiger track. I would say this is a healthy one adult tiger. For example, Hue Kai Kang right now, we are the biggest home of Indo-Chinese tiger population.
Welcome back. Costa Rica are the final name in the draw for the Qatar 2022 World Cup. They became the 32nd side to book their place, beating New Zealand in the second intercontinental playoff match. Just a single goal coming in the opening few minutes from Joel Campbell. Kiwis couldn't come back despite their best efforts. They had a goal disallowed by VAR, also shown a red card. New Zealand finishing with just 10 men, while their Central American opponents celebrate qualifying for a third straight time. And when I say celebrate, these were the scenes back in Costa Rica, where it was lunchtime. Government workers had been given time off, especially to watch their national side try and qualify for the tournament.